My team and I conducted a thorough, independent investigation. We identified evidence that the president willfully retained classified materials. We did not, however, identify evidence that rose to the level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because the evidence fell short of that standard, I declined to recommend criminal charges against Mr. Biden. What I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe. I did not sanitize my explanation, nor did I disparage the president unfairly.
Robert Hur, the special counsel appointed to look into Joe Biden's handling of classified documents, testified before the House on Capitol Hill today to defend his decision to not recommend charging President Biden with a crime over how he handled those classified documents. Now, this was a politicized event. Both sides, in my opinion, were pretty unbearable to say the least, because the 6-hour-plus hearing was really all about getting that perfect soundbite to exploit for political advantages. There was no other real reason for this hearing. And I'm gonna make that case as we go through the details of what happened today. So first off, you have two sides who are unhappy with her for two different reasons. On one hand, you have Democrats who are happy with the fact that he decided against recommending charges against Biden, but very, very unhappy that he essentially described Biden as an old, feeble person that would actually garner sympathy from a jury. Republicans actually liked that part, but they hated the fact that he decided against recommending that Biden face criminal charges. And that was basically the dynamic we're dealing with throughout the entirety of this hearing. We're gonna show you some highlights and some clips, but before we do that, Cenk, am I being unfair? Was this actually an incredibly important hearing for the American people?
For the American people, okay? And you guys aren't paying attention to their theatrics. A lot of mainstream media don't give you honest news. We do, you know why? Because of you. Paid membership on YouTube makes all the difference. Hit the join button below and you become the hero that sustains us. Okay, no, it was totally utterly useless. But we're gonna show you how it was useless and how both sides demagogue, and it's so frustrating. You know, you read the transcript, and you know what conclusion you come to about he, him, her, that yeah, he pretty much nailed it, right? Biden does forget a lot of things and he's definitely not guilty. And I don't really care about the feelings of the two sides. Like Republicans and Democrats can catch all sorts of feelings about that, but he's definitely not guilty and he's definitely super old. So feelings sent in your direction, okay?
Right, I mean, Hur said in the video we showed you at the very beginning that there wasn't, the evidence fell short for him to recommend criminal charges, right?
And it's definite. I mean, having read the transcript, the brother, yes, he rambles on, right? He'll start telling you about how he put together his house, and Hur is constantly like, while that's very exciting, Mr. President, I'd like to get back to the question. Because Biden's a giant narcissist and can't stop talking about, bragging about rando stuff, right? And his wife in a bathing suit, etc.
No, please don't.
And then look, some parts of the not remembering is not fair. Like I don't remember who I had lunch with and where we were in 2019, let alone 2009. But he consistently couldn't remember when he was president.
Vice
president,
yeah.
Sorry. So like slip ups like that, it happens to every person. You have to be fair in how you look at it. But overall, were there many instances of him forgetting things he probably shouldn't be forgetting and sounding pretty old? Yes, and so.
Yeah, which is interesting because if you didn't read the transcript for yourself and you just went based on the headlines you might have come across in the corporate press today, you would be under the assumption that Robert Hur totally misrepresented what the interview with Joe Biden was like. And in fact, Joe Biden was sharp, super aware of what was going on and didn't forget much. That's not exactly right. So let's get to the element of the transcript that is being pitched as misrepresented by Hur and conservatives, when in reality, Biden did forget something pretty significant. So now both Hur and Biden weren't totally accurate in their characterization of the interview that they had, particularly regarding what Hur said was Biden's inability to recall his son Beau's date of him passing, right? When did your son pass? Now, according to a transcript of the exchange, Biden said the following: "What month did Beau die? Oh God, May 30th. Okay, so he remembered the day and the month, and that was the correct date. Then he briefly wondered aloud what year his son Beau died, and a White House lawyer interjected by saying 2015. So let's go to that. Was it 2015 he had died, Biden asked. When someone responded affirmatively, the president added it was 2015. So look, that wasn't, in my opinion, the worst part of the transcript for Biden.
Me too.
Biden not remembering when he served as vice president was a problem in the transcript.
Yeah, like I'll give you an example. He's like April of 2009. 2009. Was I still vice president then? Brother, you had just started as vice president at that time. That was not at all complicated. I could see even forgetting the year that your son passed away. It could have been 2016, I don't think that's that big a deal. But 2008 to 2016, we all remember it. I mean, it's not hard. And 2009 is right in the beginning of the term, and he thinks, was it over by then? So, but part of the reason to do the stories we're gonna get to here is to show you how much clowns our legislators are, to obsess over things that are actually super obvious.
Another thing that's worth noting is that in a press conference that followed the release of the report, that Biden basically raged. We all talked about this, right? Biden had raged about the comment made about his age in that report, and even said that he raged at the fact that had the audacity to even ask about his son Beau's death. Except didn't ask about his son Beau's death. Biden was the one who randomly volunteered the information in the context of this interview with her. Didn't ask the president about his son's death. Biden brought it up himself during a discussion about how he stored documents at a rental home in Virginia after leaving the vice president's office in 2017. So he even forgot the context in which his son Beau was brought up, and the person who brought up his son Beau was Biden himself.
Yeah, that one I don't think is forgetting. I think that they were trying to smear her by pretending that he was using the death of Biden's son as some sort of gotcha for Biden. But in reality, Biden either forgot, which doesn't help his case, or is lying actively to try to smear her because he brought up his son's death, not her.
Exactly. Now, with that said, let's go to the testimony. I think that context was important to know about before we watch some of the highlights, if you want to call it that, from this hearing. So Democrats repeatedly came back to the fact that did not recommend charges against Biden. Remember, that's where they got a win, and they really want to emphasize that. But they also scolded her on multiple occasions during today's hearing for his characterization of Biden's memory. In his testimony, said his report's discussion of Biden's memory was necessary and accurate and fair because his state of mind was an important part of evaluating whether he committed a crime. Meaning, did he intentionally, knowingly, illegally take classified documents with him to his home? And it appears, based on her evaluation of all of this, that is not the case. And in fact, once Biden realized he was in possession of classified documents, he immediately notified the proper individuals, and they then took the documents from him. Okay, it's very different from what we saw from Trump, who had multiple opportunities to hand over the classified documents and on multiple occasions lied to the federal government about what he possessed and whether or not he possessed additional classified documents. And then that led to, of course, an FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago. Now, with that said, Democrats were not buying the argument that it was important for her to include Biden's memory as part of the report. Let's watch.
I want to refer back to your opening statement in which you said that you did not disparage the president in your report. But of course, you did disparage the president. You also understand DOJ policy that you are to take care not to prejudice the interests of the subject of an investigation, right?
That is generally one of the interests that DOJ policy requires that prosecutors respect.
And it was your obligation to follow that policy in this report, was it not?
It was also my obligation to write a confidential report for the Attorney General explaining completely my decision.
What you did write was deeply prejudicial to the interests of the president. You say it wasn't political, and yet you must have understood. You must have understood the impact of your words. You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing. It was a choice. You certainly didn't have to include that language. That was a political choice. It was the wrong choice.
I want to go to one more Democrat. So that was Representative Adam Schiff. And now I want to go to Democrat Hank Johnson, who accused her of trying to get Trump reelected.
You are a Republican, though, aren't you?
I am a registered Republican.
Yes, sir. And you're doing everything you can do to get President Trump reelected so that you can get appointed as a federal judge or perhaps to another position in the Department of Justice. Isn't that correct?
Congressman, I have no such aspirations, I can assure you, and I can tell you that partisan politics had no place whatsoever in my work. It had no place in the investigative steps that I took. It had no place in the decision that I made, and it had no place in a single word of my report.
If Hur's report was purely politically motivated, why wouldn't he just go for the whole enchilada and recommend criminal charges for Joe Biden? Could it be that Hur was attempting to be as honest as he could in this report, which I genuinely think that's what he was doing? And by the way, like, I love how stupid Democrats think we are, right? Because if it wasn't for Hur's report, none of us would be aware of Biden's mental decline. We would all think that he's as sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
God damn, why did Hur do this?
Yeah.
We're not stupid. We all have eyes. We can all hear. We all see what's happening. Okay, yeah. Just please.
So now let me give a little bit more context and background here. So first of all, of course, I agree with Anna. If he was really wanted to get Biden, there's one way he could have done it: charge him. That would have been devastating for Joe Biden. It would have totally made it seem like Donald Trump taking home the documents and refusing to give them back was even with Joe Biden. So that would have been the political way to go, and he didn't do that. And in fact, the Republicans were livid with him for not doing that. So this idea that they're concocting that this was a political hatchet job against Joe Biden is absurd, given that the report's entire thesis is he was innocent. He didn't do it. And part of the reason that he was innocent is because when you look at the documents that he took, they weren't like the amount of classified documents, both the quantity and the quality of it was nowhere near what Trump took. Trump took home some of the most sensitive secrets we have. Biden took home a letter he wrote to Obama about Afghanistan. He should have left it back at the White House, but he did. I mean, it was minor. But the second part of it was he can't remember what's in the boxes, who brought the boxes. And you see a lot of defendants going, I can't recollect. Wink, right? This is not wink. The brother really can't recollect a lot of these things.
I mean,
and so that is why he's not guilty. And they're yelling at him like, why did you say the president is not guilty? How dare you? You were trying to hurt him, weren't you? He's like, I don't know what else I could have done. I mean, I told you he's not guilty. I told you why he's not guilty, and you're still yelling at me.
All of this is just, look, I hated every second of this hearing. I hated that the hearing took place because understand that it's just a facade. It's not meant to accomplish anything other than engage in political campaigning for their preferred presidential candidate. Both sides engaged in that today for 6 hours.
Yeah,
it's so absurd, Cenk.
Yeah, one last thing about that, especially Adam Schiff, and although they all did it, but why are they doing it? So part of it is in Washington, this is a culture that doesn't exist in your neck of the woods. It might exist in different contexts, but in Washington, the more ass you kiss, the higher you go. So Adam Schiff is known as a giant ass kisser within the Democratic Party. That's why Nancy Pelosi and everyone else supported him in his Senate run in California. They're like, oh, he's a good team player. That means he does propaganda for us. He does whatever he's told to do by corporate donors and by leadership, etc. That's partly why he's doing these theatrics. Didn't you know, dear sir? Yeah, bring it down. Then the second reason though is, I gotta be honest, there is a core group of establishment Democratic voters, and they want you to say beautiful, awesome, flowery things about Democratic leadership. And if you don't, they get super mad at the politician.
Well, they're doing well. These are typically well-to-do, hyper-educated, elite Americans who are untouched by a lot of the crises that ordinary Americans are dealing with, whether it be the opioid crisis, fentanyl overdose deaths, the housing crisis, the migrant crisis everywhere. They just love the drama, right? To them, political engagement is watching this pathetic theater and feeling as though these elected lawmakers are actually serving the American people. They're not serving the American people. And look, I know we're being very critical of Democrats specifically right now, and it's mostly because I'm personally sick of getting gaslit about Biden's mental health and where he really is in terms of his ability to, I don't know, even understand where he's at any moment. But nonetheless, like, stop with the gaslighting, stop with the theater, and actually, I don't know, try to pass legislation that improves the lives of ordinary people. Like anyway, but yes, the other side of that picture is the Republican Party. They do serve as obstructionists when it comes to the necessary passage of legislation. They just did that with the border bill. So we've got plenty of critique for them, and we're gonna get to that in a moment. But Cenk, jump in.
Yeah, there's a third reason why they do this theatrics, because it gives you the sense of faux fighting for you. Like, they don't actually fight for you when it comes to bills, paid family leave, higher wages, lower drug prices, etc. So they use this as an opportunity to pretend that they're fighting for you. So they have the theatrics, the anger, the strong words, the rebukes that gives you a sense that they're fighting for Democratic voters without actually doing anything. So that's another reason. And the same for the Republicans. And that's why they love this kind of theater. It makes the rest of us want to vomit.
Totally. So with that said, let's go to our first Republican. Here's Tom McClintock, who is very upset with Hur's decision against recommending criminal charges for Biden.
The fact that the only person being prosecuted for this offense happens to be the president's political opponent makes this an unprecedented assault on our democracy. This is the worst we could expect from a banana republic. And I wonder how you square this.
I just can't stand them lying to everyone with a straight face. Okay, it's not the same thing. We all know it's not the same thing. If Donald Trump had just handed over the classified documents after it had become abundantly clear that he illegally took classified documents home with him, you think the FBI would have raided him? You think that the feds wanted to drop it? They just wanted the documents. Homeboy would not hand over the documents. This is Trump's mess. It's his own making. Whereas Biden handed over the documents right away. There's a clear difference, but McClintock knows that, Cenk. He knows that.
No, look, at this point, almost every federal Republican politician, almost, it's giant liars. If you hear a Republican politician talking, that you're hearing a Republican politician lying, like 99% of the time. It is as terrible as the Republicans have been my whole life, they're now at some epic level here. So now he knows that Trump took home documents like how we could attack Iran, where Iran's defense is, things that, first of all, is just the most sensitive information that the United States government has. Second of all, information that Iran's top nemesis, not Israel, Saudi Arabia would love. And who is Donald Trump really close to? Who did his son-in-law just get $2 billion from? Who did Donald Trump himself get giant golf contracts from? Saudi Arabia. Oh, golly gee, do I have our top secrets on Iran lying around on my desk? I mean, so even if he didn't sell it to the Saudis, given that context, to take that material home is beyond outrageous, let alone Russia's nuclear capabilities on their submarines, which he's handing out at Mar-a-Lago for anyone who's become a member, etc. No, Trump is wildly out of control. McClintock and all the Republicans know that, but their job is to lie to Republican voters because feelings, right? And they feel like, oh yeah, we're the victims. Oh, we're such victims. We just wanted to sell our nuclear secrets. I mean, we don't get any of it. Trump gets all of it, and I'm going to give him extra. We're victims. Okay, and so the Republicans give him that load of crap. But second of all, why are you asking her this question? He only investigated Biden. He's like, why was Trump charged? He's like, I don't know, I didn't charge him. Like, this is so monumentally dumb.
It's just a giant waste of time, and it does nothing for us. And I'm just sick of it. I'm just sick of all of it. I'm sick of the hearings. I'm sick of the very obvious political campaigning that's being done under the false pretense of, congressional hearings to get to the bottom of the truth. It's just BS. And it's a waste of time and resources. But this is what they do because they want to give the illusion of governance. And I just think the American people, regardless of where you stand politically, should be demanding a lot more than endless hearings so they can use up taxpayer money to do their political campaigning.